So you've touched on a couple Cardinals things recently. I really loved your piece on Brendan Donovan, and let me just say that we kind of see this very similar way. There's a tendency to maybe doubt him because not the highest exit velocity, hard hit rate, all that stuff. And he doesn't appear to have a lot of power. But you made the point, and I hope I get this right. I did read it, but I just hope I interpret it right, that it's kind of cool to have guys like this in Major League Baseball. Is that,
yeah.
It really, and you're so right. Yeah, go right ahead, my man.
Baseball is not about figuring out which thing wins the most. I mean, that's a big part of it, but I like watching baseball, and I like watching people like Brendan Donovan. It's great. I love that there's guys up there that can just, look like they're swinging 85% of their max swing and just smacking the ball foul every time and taking a walk or poking one through the hole. It's really fun.
Listen, I'm a big analytics guy. And I'm not one of the old timey sports writer who growls about everything. I get this stuff. I know it's important, but it's also important for people like me to remember. We can't sort of fit all of these hitters onto one template. And I must confess, there's something cool about a guy that represents what you would call kind of a throwback hitter. It reminds us there's a lot of different ways to be successful. And the thing I always like, I don't have it in front of me, his hits distribution last season, it was almost equal, to left field, center field, right field. I mean, he just moves the ball around. And, there's a lot to be said for that. Avoiding outs. That's his best quality, not making outs, right?
It's the best quality you can have in baseball. And I think that a lot has been made of a really smart thing that a lot of analytical people noticed about baseball, which is that it's really hard to have the kind of bat control to poke balls where fielders aren't, and almost no one can do it. And if you're teaching a bunch of people how to be good at baseball, don't teach them that way. That's not the right way. But you know what? Hard is not the same as impossible, and Brendan Donovan can do it. And most players in the major leagues even just don't have the kind of bat control and feel for the zone that he does. He's pretty unique.
Ben Clemens from Fangraphs. Right now we're talking about Brendan Donovan and his kind of unique profile in terms of his offensive approach. And I wanted to ask you this. I've said this, and I know others have said it, where the old, you'd like to see him hit for more power. And then every time I see that, I'm like, well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with a 394 on base percentage. A guy doesn't strike you out, and a guy who gets hit by pitches and walks a lot. That'll play. Do you think there's a danger? Do you think there's a danger that sort of this outside noise will get to him? He's like, oh, they say I can't hit for power. I'll show him. That kind of thing. You think that'll become a factor where he gets outside of his approach that's worked so well?
I think one thing that is always worrisome about a guy who does it the way he does is that he's on a tightrope. So if he tries to hit for power and it doesn't quite work, that won't really work. But if pitchers just pound the zone because he's taking more off of his swing and trying to slap it even softer and cut into his walks, then it starts to kind of crumble that way. And so he's just at it's really hard to excel doing what he does. You have to have the balance dialed up well, and he seems to have it right now. I hope that it's not getting in his head, but I don't know how much of it is getting in his head and how much of it is just that he needs to constantly making adjustments, you can't just stay the same as that type of hitter and not occasionally try to sneak one. You really don't want pitchers just grooving you fastballs and saying, whatever, we'll start the at-bat once I get to 2 strikes. And he's been adept at it so far. It's hard. It's really hard to be good this way, and he's rising to the challenge.
Do you share the concerns, if that's the proper term, the concerns that he's due for a regression in 2023?
I mean, I don't think he'll be as good in 2023 as he was in 2022 because he was one of the 5 best leadoff hitters in baseball, and I don't think that's reasonable to expect again. I think people kind of misuse regression.
Right.
Yeah. Do I think Brendan Donovan will be as good as he was last year? No, probably not. I don't think Paul Goldschmidt will be as good as he was last year either. He won an MVP, so you shouldn't bet on that happening again. But I don't think he's going to be bad. I think he's going to be an above-average hitter. So I think there's plenty of space for him to quote-unquote regress and still, I think, surprise people to the upside and be good. If you think he's going to be as good as he was last year, every year for the rest of his career, I mean, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. He can still be really good, really valuable to the Cardinals, the kind of hitter who you can build a lineup behind without being quite as good as he was last year.
Ben Clemens is with us. One of the things, many things Ben does well at Fangraphs, he did it again with this piece we're about to talk about, entitled "You Can't Fake Exit Velocity," and we'll get to that just in a second. Before I set it up, I don't know how Ben does this. He does these because I can't. He does these, pardon the cliche, deep dive looks at a particular aspect of performance, and he comes up with great stuff. I mean, the charts are great, the information's great, it's presented beautifully. All the points that should be made are made in an intelligent way without bias. And he somehow manages to get all this done in 800 words or something. You know, with me, it's more like 8,000. So if you have any secrets to share, I would appreciate it. I think the people that read my stuff would appreciate it. You are economical for someone who's so comprehensive. That is not easy to do.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to what my namesake Samuel Clemens said once. I didn't have time to write you a long letter. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one.
That's really good. I'm going to steal that.
Chiseling down, you got to do.
I know,
takes
man.
a long time to write words.
I'm really, really bad. I think it's actually bad for business because people are, in our culture, people don't want to read long things.
Although that's
yeah.
hard.
It is. Let's talk about. I really like the piece. You can't fake exit velocity, and what I wanted you to do, if you will, please, is explaining to maybe people that aren't. Well, I'm not going to say they aren't buying it, but they don't know what to make of it. They'd like to learn more about the connection between, high exit velocity, hard hit rate, all that good stuff, and success. Like how important that is to your success. So you can do a little classroom session here, Mr. Samuel Clemens.
You may not know that, but that's actually my middle name. So,
it is? It is?
Yeah, my dad has a real sense of humor. I hope he's listening.
I think that's outstanding. That's outstanding.
So one of the things that I think really throws people off about quote-unquote StatCast metrics, whatever you want to call it, is that there's just so many of them. There's just so many different things you can say. But what we're really trying to do is, with these metrics, is just tell you things that scouts knew and have always known, but quantify them just enough to where two people don't look at the same guy and see completely different things. So one of the really important characteristics about a hitter is when he hits the ball right, when he gets all of it, how hard does he hit it? Why does that matter? Because what you do when you hit the ball 100 miles an hour and hit the ball 105 miles an hour is really different. Below 100 miles an hour, it's kind of hard to hit a home run. Once you get up to 105, that's those ones that you hear off the bat and you're like, I mean, if it's fair, it's gone. And so knowing where you can get to when you get all of it is really important. I mean, a good example is Donovan. Donovan needs to have just a ton of other things go right for him to be good offensively, because when he hits the ball squarely, it's not always a home run, right? He needs to get it really perfect for it to be a home run. Now, he does all those other things right. It's not the end-all, be-all, but how hard you hit the ball has a lot to say about what's going to happen when you make good contact. And everybody knows the name of the game in hitting these days is making a lot of good contact, because pitchers are hard to hit. You're going to strike out some. It's really hard not to. Even the best hitters strike out 10% of the time. You gotta do some damage when you connect. And so trying to measure the top 5% of people's hard hit balls, just how fast they're coming off the bat. It's like pitch speed, but for batted ball speed. That really matters. And so one thing that I was curious about is, we see hitters every year who are flashes in the pan, or we see guys who are like, if they could just improve this one skill, they'd be amazing. And so I thought, well, how often does that actually happen? And as it turns out, the hardest skill to change, if you look at all the major league hitters in baseball, it's not how often you swing at bad pitches, although that's hard to change. It's not how often you make contact, although, again, hard to change. The absolute hardest thing to change is how hard you hit the ball when you hit it perfect. And that's like a really, really useful insight if you're wondering, hey, like this guy has everything except this one thing. What do you want that one thing to be? Well, you really don't want it to be how hard they hit the ball if you're looking for kind of like peak amazing performance kind of guys. Like Paul Goldschmidt, he has his issues with swing and miss. I keep coming back to him as an example because he's a really good one. Arenado, kind of same deal, you know? He doesn't strike out a ton, but he doesn't walk much. He just swings a lot. He chases too much. It doesn't matter because when they hit the ball right, they just destroy it. And that you just can't fake. Like, it's real and it's consistent from year to year, and hitters just mostly don't change. If you can hit the ball hard this year, you'll hit the ball hard next year. If you can't this year, you can't next year. With the exception of our friend Lars Nootbaar, who's a cheat code.
That's right. And I wanted to ask about him. See, I do think that there are folks that, based on the feedback that I get, and I'm not claiming they represent all Cardinals fans. It's a percentage. How many, I don't know. And they're not rude about Nootbaar. They're not saying, "Oh, that guy. I don't know why you guys like him." Blah blah blah. It's not like that. But they wonder whether the Cardinals are making a mistake in just, in effect, just believing in him so as much as they do. And even people like me who, have been really enthusiastic about his hitting, not just the exit velocity, and but the fact that he walks a ton. He's the quintessential hit the ball really hard on a consistent basis and have phenomenal plate discipline. I mean, isn't that exactly, in effect, what you're looking for in a hitter, that combination? And do you believe he has that? In other words, it wasn't just a one-year thing or a half-a-season thing.
Yeah, so he's a great example of this. And I'll bring up some things that you need to not take too much out of my study. Don't believe everything I say. There's always limits. So when Nootbaar debuted, though, I mean, I think you probably thought the same as me, that he was not a power guy, that he was kind of a latter-day Keith Hernandez type, where he would spray the ball around, but despite being a big dude, he didn't really hit for that much power. And the reason for that is because he didn't hit for that much power. Like, he didn't hit for any power in college at USC. He didn't hit for much power in the minors. And so I thought, what, it doesn't matter. Like, his profile is still really good. He has, elite pitch recognition. That's what the Cardinals drafted him for. I mean, you could ask them. They'll tell you that. Just elite. He's maybe the best Cardinal on the whole team at kind of understanding the strike zone already. That's impressive. That's more of an old man skill. He just has it. And he just got a lot better at hitting the ball hard. It's not that surprising. He's a big dude, he is 6'3", 6'4", and he's not skinny. He's not Christian Yelich out there, you look at him and you're like, he should hit for power. And that's one of the key things that I don't know about this is, how about young player development? Like, when you are in the minor leagues and not fully formed yet, you haven't made the majors with your swing, can you just go start adding just a ton of top-end power? And that's what Nootbaar did. He went to Driveline, all the time. During the All-Star break in 2021. Baseball season was going on. He got 4 days off, and he was like, I'm going to go train at a hitting facility. And he improved how quickly he swings the bat by a ton. And, I mean, he managed to do it while keeping his good sense of the zone. I think this is, maybe a little bit of hyperbole, but not by a ton. When I talk to people kind of around the game, public side analysts mainly, but some team people as well, they all think Nootbaar is a star. I think he's passed kind of everyone else in that Cardinals orbit that isn't Arenado and Goldschmidt as this guy's their third guy. And I just totally believe it. I mean, numbers can lie to you, and it's not guaranteed or anything, but I'm really high on him. I think he's going to be a star in the major leagues for years to come. I would pretty much bank on it.
I'm with you in the pitch recognition, and the fact that he's got one of the lowest chase rates among major league hitters. You just can't get him to do dumb things at the plate. Not very often, anyway.
That's a really good way of putting it. He just doesn't do dumb things, and that's a lot of the battle.
It really is. And, our friend, and I don't mean this as a cheap shot because I like Nolan Gorman a lot, but maybe Gorman needs to hang out with him a little bit around the cage. Now, because he's really, Nootbaar's got it down as far as what you needed to do. What's the most important things to do if you want to be a really terrific hitter? So let me ask you this, and it's a related question, but I want to ask you some other Cardinal stuff. The great Ben Clemens is with us from Fangraphs. Since I mentioned Gorman, let me ask you about that. What would you deal with him if someone came to you and said, Ben, you know all the data, you know all this, you know that. Should we play him at second base? Should we DH him? Like, what would you recommend the best way to use him in 2023?
I have to defer to the Cardinals on the minutia of the defense. If you asked me right now with no more information, and I couldn't get any more than what's available publicly, I would not play him at second base. I think it's just going to matter too much, particularly like your actions around second with the not shift ban, but shift restrictions. It's just going to matter a lot more how much range your second baseman has, essentially, and how much ability he has to cleanly pivot from fielding to throwing to first. So there's going to be fewer of the balls where they're 5 steps into the outfield grass, the ball's slowing down as it gets to them, and they're running forward. And there's going to be a lot more kind of like diving left, diving right reaction plays. Just that's the way the math works. Like you can't stand in the outfield anymore, and you have to cover a little more range. So closer in and more range to cover tougher plays. That scares me because he's like, no knock on him. He's not a second baseman. He grew up playing third base. He was supposed to be a third baseman, and hey, look, sorry, buddy, like you can't do it here. So I think that's tough for him, and I think that probably that's the kind of thing that they know better than I do. But from what I can see publicly, I'm not a huge believer in his ability to kind of hold down second. I would DH him, and I think he's got enough power to where it's fine. Like I said, you can't fake exit velocity, and he's got it, but he needs to improve at the pitch recognition side. He's half a Nootbaar, like you said. And look, I think it's the harder half to find, and that's why he is a prized prospect throughout the ranks. And also, if you look at his track record and as a professional, he does figure out the bat to ball stuff and the pitch recognition stuff. He struggles the first time he tries a level, and then he kind of like puts his head down and gets to it. And he always has the power, and it's just a matter of making it play. And so I wouldn't be shocked at all if that happened this year. Like that's been a pattern throughout his professional career.
Right.
He's highly regarded because like all he really has to do is kind of get enough in the pitch recognition side. And man, like when he hits the ball cleanly, he puts on a batting practice show. He can really hit it. So if I'm them, I'm basically trying to run him out in that kind of like backup Goldschmidt when he needs a day off, kind of multiple backup plus DH against righties role. Cardinals have a pretty packed offensive side this year, so it's not going to be like it's not like there's that many spots for him to play, but like because Yepez is probably going to be backing up first base as well, and maybe doing some outfieldy stuff too. But I think there are enough at bats to at least get Yepez and Gorman in there with who we think of as a regular core. It's going to be tough, but I think they can do it. People always get hurt.
Yeah, my friend and colleague on the show, Jim Hewer, was asked on the air, I think it was yesterday, about, could Gorman play first base? And, I sort of gave a no answer. And now that you mention it, I think it's good to revisit this because I just can't remember how much experience, if any, he's had at first base. Not in the majors, but I'm talking about in his relatively brief time in the minors. Did he show nothing?
No.
But
they moved him straight to second, just because they already had both guys in place.
Right, I got you. Well, thanks for clearing that up because we didn't know. Yeah. How would you this is another one, and frankly, this is like a brain teaser. Now, granted, my brain's not very powerful, but I get a headache every time I sit down and I'm like, okay, Cardinals outfield with Walker, without Walker. Like, how should it lay out? And it quickly does become a bit of a puzzle. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not just like, well, who starts? But it's like, well, where are they best located? Is Nootbaar best located in right or center? Carlson center or right? can O'Neill play center reliably? So, I mean, let's take it from this. When Jordan Walker, is given a Cardinals uniform for good, whenever that is, how do you see the outfield laying out? What's the grid out there, in your mind?
In my mind, the key thing that the Cardinals need to figure out, like now and early in this year, but also in spring training, is Dylan Carlson a plus center fielder? Because he kind of looked like it last year. Which
he did.
I don't think they expected. Their plan was not to play him there, and I haven't asked anyone about this, but it certainly seems to me from the outside that he was just good enough filling in for an injured Bader that they said, nah, like, we have a big logjam and we need pitching. Like, we can get rid of Bader, survive with Carlson there. If that's the case, like, I just don't think O'Neill can play center field and stay healthy. I don't think there's just no precedent for a guy like that doing it. I mean, maybe Aaron Judge, but the Yankees have specifically tried to not do that for injury reasons. So I think that's like question A. I understand that Nootbaar can play center field. I'm skeptical that he's going to be kind of a long-term option there. I just don't think he has the combination of defensive instincts and speed to make that work. He's fast, and he gets acceptable jumps. I think he's exactly average in his jumps, but I think you need to either be great burning speed or have good instinctual jumps, and I just don't think he has the combination to be an above average center fielder. I think he's a pretty good right fielder, and he has a big arm too.
He does.
And a right field makes a lot of sense for him naturally to me. So the question for me to answer is, can Carlson play center? Because if he can't, that makes things a lot tougher. That kind of looks like moving 1 to 2 of Carlson and O'Neill and finding a new center fielder when Walker's up for good. Because I think Walker's a right field, left field kind of guy. He also has a huge arm, obviously. So maybe he moves Nootbaar to left, and you have just a good rangy outfield all over the place. But the most important question to me is just who plays center, because I think the hitters will work themselves out. I expect O'Neill to bounce back, but he's very volatile, and I do think if he's having a bad start to the season, it's pretty easy to just say, "Look, man, you've had 1 out of 4 good seasons. We got to try something else."
Right.
And if Carlson can't play center, kind of same deal.
And they're hoping, and we all look at Carlson and say, hope he figures something out about how to do better against right-handed pitching, and that's a big part of that. That'll be a big part of their season and their offensively and how much he plays. I mean, my goodness, does he crush left-handed pitchers? It's numbers, and we're not talking about 1,000 or more plate appearances, but still, the problem is he doesn't see many left-handed pitchers, but he's something else. What do you make of Alec Burleson? I refuse to judge him based on what we saw for obvious reasons. I think my sense talking to Cardinals people is they really, really like him, but maybe there's no answer right now about where he fits in, especially when Walker is given the uniform. But how do you see an Alec Burleson?
Yeah, kind of is a luxury, unfortunately, for him. The Cardinals just aren't short at the positions that he plays, which is I guess right field.
I guess
but
that's
kind
right.
Kind of DH first base. It's funny, you'd think he'd have a huge outfield arm. He's a two-way player in college, but he just doesn't really. I don't quite know what's up with that. I think he's just a really luxury kind of bench quad A piece, and man, that's a statement to the Cardinals' depth, because he would be a lot better than that for a lot of teams. But it's just really hard to break in if you don't have some middle infield or basically up the middle of the diamond versatility. There's just Cardinals don't really need someone else to stand at first base or the outfield corners. I mean, look, they'll take you if you can hit enough, but I think it's just really hard to hit more with longer track record than the guys they already have doing that. I'm totally with you. I don't make anything of his performance in the majors last year. It just wasn't enough, and he played great at AAA. He looked like the real deal. I hope he gets a chance to do it in the major leagues. They just I don't know, they hit on too many corner outfielders. The guy he could squeeze out, honestly, is one of Carlson or O'Neill. If those guys both can't handle center and both aren't hitting, it's kind of hard to deny, like, hey, let's just play this guy at DH. And, like, I don't know, Gorman can figure out an outfield corner.
Yeah, I always wondered about that, too, why maybe that wasn't more of a consideration. I still have a few things to ask, but I also don't want to take advantage of your kindness. But so you tell me when you have to go. Seriously, I mean that. No offense.
Anything right now.
Okay, good. I wanted to ask you about. Let me think. There's so much. If you look at the Cardinals' pitching staff, I'm trying to talk their rotation. I'm sorry. I'm really trying to talk myself into buying that Jack Flaherty will stay healthy and have a good season. Now, I don't even know how to define good season. I'm not talking about necessarily second half of 2019. But after all of these disruptions and injuries, is a person of my ilk kind of nuts for thinking that Jack Flaherty will come through in 2023? What are your expectations?
I mean, I just don't know what to expect. It's the kind of thing where he'll have to show it to me, and I think what the Cardinals are doing is really rational. Give him every chance to reestablish what he was then, right? Because he was awesome, and like in a pretty repeatable looking way. I mean, he's not going to be that good, right? Like that was the kind of performance that even the game's greats don't usually put up for half a season. That was just a remarkable, probably never to be repeated stretch. But he looks the part of an above average, like number 2 starter. And I think they're going to give him a lot of chances to get it back. It's just really hard to work off the amount of rust he has, and we just won't know what's there, you know? One thing that I always try to maintain in my head about pitchers to just keep myself sane is that they change a lot, and they change more frequently than hitters because it really matters. Like, just little things matter more for them. And, like, yeah, great. That's true and fair, and I don't know, I should give him more time, and he needs to adjust. He's thrown 150 innings in the last 3 years. It's going to be a lot of rust. That's too much. Like, too much time between good outings.
I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I really don't know what to make of Jordan Montgomery. I mean, he was impressive. I also know that maybe what happened his last 4 starts, only one of those was really bad, or maybe 2. It was a little misleading. But my point is, he wasn't, as these things go in baseball, he wasn't as great as he looked in his first 7-8 starts or whatever it is, and kind of came back to earth. So that leaves me wondering over a full season. I'm not sure how to set my expectations. I think a lot of Cardinals fans feel the same way. I haven't taken a stand. Oh no, he's going to be really, really good. Or no, forget it. He was kind of a fluke. I really don't know what to make of him. I'm embarrassed because I have the data available. I can kind of figure things out on my own about, swing and miss, what pitches work. But I'm still kind of like in the middle with him. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's a good pitcher for Busch Stadium. I think that his style, which is, it's not exactly pitch to contact, but it's got a little bit of that, like, kind of Adam Wainwright, like, make them hit pitches that just work pretty well for us to it. The thing that has always scared me about Montgomery's performance on the Cardinals is that he just throws a lot of 4-seam fastballs for a guy who's going to be, like, more of a manage what happens once they hit the ball guy. And those miss more bats, yeah, but they're a lot easier to put in the air and a lot easier to hit home runs on. I think that plays pretty well at Busch just because it's really hard to hit the ball out. And so like that pairing works all right. Like, you can be a pitch to contact fly ball guy there in a way that it's harder to be in a lot of parks. It's funny because I thought he was going to be more of a sinker guy, and he just kind of switched it up when he came to the Cardinals. He got plenty of ground balls, don't get me wrong, but he did it with a pitch that is going to lead to a lot of fly balls in the long run. I guess that leaves me thinking he's like a huge luxury as a number 4 starter and a pretty good number 3 starter. But I hope that Flaherty pitches in such a way that he passes him in the rotation, because Like, you can have a pretty good team with Jack Flaherty as your second best starter, I think. I think that's tough if Jordan Montgomery is your second best starter.
Ben, maybe the final question for you, because I really appreciate it, because we could go through all these players, and I'm interested in your opinion. Pardon me, very much so. I know Dusty Blake's, general history. I know how much he was acclaimed when he was the pitching coach at Duke. I know he's kind of a someone that the analytics community, that cliche, what the analytics community. No, he's viewed as a really promising guy as far as someone who really gets it. Based on what you know, and we're all trying to learn more. Can he do more for the Cardinals pitchers than maybe Mike Maddox did? This is not my attempt to disparage Maddox, but I also know that he was a lot more old school than looking for new ways to get better work done. So I have hopes for Dusty Blake. Do you know much about him? Do you share that optimism that maybe he can crack the code a little bit and really get through this, this kind of psychological barrier about really committing to some of the advanced stuff?
Yeah, I know, like, more broad strokes, basically the same way that you do. But one thing that I've heard a lot from various people kind of around the game is that he was pretty good at working with people, and that maybe he was not the ultimate coach at, like, teaching a new style. The Astros are wizards at teaching their guys how to throw just an exploding four-seam fastball. The Guardians are just the best in the business at adding 3 miles an hour to command first pitchers. I don't know if he's going to suddenly have some kind of trick up his sleeve like that, but I do think that from everything I've heard, he's going to have more individualized plans for pitchers. I think that that's important, and more so than, like, I know this one trick to make pitching work. Like, man, there's a lot of ways to succeed being a pitcher, and if you try to force your guys into a cookie-cutter mold without doing a lot of work kind of on the intake side to get the right kind of people to do that, it's tough. And so I think that one of the things that good pitching teams have is communication between, like, the player acquisition side, be it scouting or development or, like, trades, free agent signings, whatever, and the pitching side, the pitching development side. So you really want to match the guys you're going out to get with the kind of things that you're good at improving. My hope is that Blake's, like, skill, the thing that's setting him apart and that got him this major league pitching coach job, is that he's pretty good at working with disparate skill sets and saying, hey, let's figure out what works for you. I don't need to be hidebound to what I have. I think that's a good idea if you're not kind of overhauling the entire player acquisition side, is to get a guy who's flexible. And my hope is that works out really well for them.
Yeah,
I'm really hard to know from the outside.
That's right. I'm really curious about him. So we can all remember this conversation, all of us, the people listening to, when Dakota Hudson finishes like third in the Cy Young award voting this year, right?
I mean, I've heard that he's good for Dakota Hudson. I know about as much as you do about that, so we'll see.
Dakota Hudson is really fired up, and you get the idea that, he's learned a lot in a very short time for just his conversations and meetings with Blake, and he's genuinely pumped up about it, which I think is good, because he's sort of been such a sad-eyed figure, just feel bad for the guy at times. He just seems so demoralized. So that's pretty cool. And Adam Wainwright, who earlier in his career, and not all that long ago, was very suspicious of, advanced metrics and this and that. And he's really come a long, long way with that, because he's recognized that actually he's helped sustain his career where he can at least, pitch respectably. And he loves Dusty Blake, and that says a lot right there.
I agree. I think pitching particularly, it's almost a misnomer to call it, like, analytically inclined. The things that pitching coaches that are good today do is teach you how to make your pitches move more, and teach you how to make it harder for hitters to pick them up. And I don't know anyone who would hear me say those words in that way and think, we don't need that. Like,
right.
Of course you want that.
Right.
And that specifically because they've just figured out ways to, like, watch pitchers' grips with like really fast cameras and say, oh, have you tried like putting a little more pressure on your index finger on the right side of the seam? Like, get away from here with that being some statistical analysis.
That's right.
Just doing the things that baseball men have always done with like more tools, and everyone should want these tools. So I'm like, I don't buy the whole like this is old school versus new school. The things they're teaching are like make your pitches move more. We all want that. So it's just a matter of how you teach it.
No, I agree. I think the push or the rub has been, and it's still there with a lot of pitchers, which is, they want to go deeper into games. They hate the third time through the lineup stuff. That's maybe one area where there's still some tension between the one side or the other. But the numbers are pretty consistent in backing up the people that, for the most part, think it's a bad idea to expose your pitchers for too long into a start. But
go ahead,
that's
a totally different battle than like, hey, what can you do off the field, before the game to get you ready? And that's where I want to see Blake's effect more so than like understanding when to come in. So little of a pitcher's day-to-day life is when he's actually on the mound. So much of it is getting ready and getting the stuff ready.
Well, listen, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for your time. You gave us a lot of time, and I've just really enjoyed the conversation. And I know our listeners do too, because we went over a lot of things that they're thinking about as far as individual Cardinals, and also little education too on the importance of exit velocity and things like that. So thanks for being able to do this, but just, thanks for just being so generous with your time. Really, really appreciate it. It was fun.
Absolutely, Bernie. Always a pleasure.
All right. That's our friend, Ben Clemens of Fangraphs. Please read him. And again, you can follow him on Twitter @Ben_Clemens. Man, did we cover some ground. I loved it. I could have kept going and going and going. See, Jim Hewer, this is a bonus for you because I'm off next Wednesday.
Yes, you are.
And I was thinking halfway through that conversation, you know what? This is going really well. It always does with Ben. And I said, you know what? I'm going to stretch this thing out because I know my guy Hewer's got to fill up a show on Wednesday. So
I like the way you're thinking.
Yeah, see that? That was a good long interview, but it wasn't an interview that would, that dragged because, again, we're so close to spring training.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many questions on all of our minds. What are they going to do with Gorman? What's best to do for Gorman? How do you see the outfield? Individual pitchers and why you should believe in Lars Nootbaar. And, there was just a lot there, and I just always enjoy, exploring those things with him.
Oh, I do too. And we had a couple texts come in about Brendan Donovan while you were talking about him. And one was, I bet one was a statement. I think Brendan Donovan might end up winning a batting title someday from a texter.
He's special because he is a throwback. And I, like Ben doesn't necessarily like those, kind of put those labels on people. But he really is. He's like a guy that I think we all – there were many more of them back in the day, so to speak, that hits the ball to left, hits it up the middle, hits it to right, doesn't try to pull everything, not interested in like, well, I'm going to hit it as hard as I can and I'm going to let it fly. That's just not in his demeanor. He's like, how do I get on? How do I help my team? On-base percentage is incredibly important to an offensive, the offensive lifeblood. It really is. And that's why, and I know there's some people that will never stop citing batting average. And frankly, it used to drive me crazy, and I'm sure it will drive me crazy again watching the broadcast this season. Because, again, I don't want to hear what a guy's batting average is. Tell me how often he gets on base.
Yes.
If he's capable of driving the ball, well, yeah, you want to see a little more oomph. I get it. But they all can't be power hitters. And if a guy is walking as many times as he strikes out in 2022, in this day and age of baseball, a guy like Donovan, who literally, might be a 1% difference, maybe 1.5%. He hardly strikes out, and he walks a ton, and he fouls off pitches. And, he hits them where they ain't. You know, he sees how the defense is set up. Oh, okay, that's cute. You're shifting me. Bing. Nice soft single to left field. That's a talent, right?
Oh, absolutely. The other text that came in while you were doing the Ben Clemens interview was, it's too bad manager put Brendan Donovan batting fifth in the playoffs and tried to turn him into a power RBI guy.
Yeah, I don't know what that was all about. I mean, that's a good point. And now that I think about it, that you mentioned it, and thank you, there had to be a reason, because Ollie thinks this stuff out really, you know, he doesn't do anything gratuitously or, you know, frivolously is a better word. I got to look at that. It's a great question. Maybe I'll get a chance to ask him when you know, the club gets back and sets up at Busch Stadium, gets ready to go. That's a really good question.
It was odd, no doubt.
Well, maybe he's just thinking on base is on base is on base is on base. I don't know. But Donovan's going to be all right.